microphone to you.
Hello, everybody. This is Adda Shur from Shur Voice, and today I have a special guest with me, Stefano de Peppo. Did I say it right?
Almost.
No, say it,
Stefano,
correct me.
I'm Stefano de Peppo.
Stefano de Peppo, who is an Italian diction coach, which we're going to speak about today, and an accomplished bass-baritone with 30 years plus credit singing all over the world in major roles. And we've just started our conversation, and we are now moving our conversation to one of my interesting, one of the most difficult parts of singing, I think, Italian recitative. And Stefano was telling me how he's now an Italian coach at the Manhattan School of Music, and he is actually teaching a class in Italian diction in the recitative style. Now, those of you who follow my channel, some of you may know opera, things may not, but recitative is where we're singing not arias, but it's in the 18th century and then basically 17th, 18th century, even 16th century
Correct. Yeah.
operas where there was dialogue that was written to notes, and it went usually very, very quickly. And you have to really be fluent in the language. And for example, Mozart's Marriage of Figaro, which was a revolutionary opera in its day for its musical form, for its complexity of trios and sextets and quartets and forms meshing into forms, had mountains of recitatives in between, where you have to be rattling off all this Italian, like as if you're fluent. And if you're not, this is where I was sort of like tear my hair out when I was in Korea. So, oh my God, all these recitatives. I learned the whole role of Susanna when I was a soprano, a young woman. Then later I learned Cherubino. And it was like, oh my goodness, all the recitative. I don't know if I can hack it. So anyway, let's just zero in for a minute on recitative, and those who know what it is do, and those who don't, well, there's Google.
Exactly.
So,
Now with
so
Google.
let's get back to our fascinating conversation about this now. So what I want to know is, how do you manage to give? So there's two ways of looking at it. Either you're gifted in languages, which really you need to be. If you're going to be an opera singer, if you're not gifted with a good ear, musical ear, number one, and if you don't have a gift for languages, then you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you, because we sing in at least 5 languages, but Italian, French, German, and English. Sadly, a lot of Americans don't know how to sing English, but that's my specialty. So how do you help young American singers get the flow, the accents, and to the sheer memorization of all that recitative?
Well, I think, first of all, well, it's a pleasure to be here and having this conversation with you, Ada. I think that one of the complex peculiarities of opera and complex accomplishments, I'm sorry about the double use of the word, for us, for singers, is try to find the right balance between, technique and style, musicality. Diction is one of those, of course. And according to singers, I think that there are priorities. There are fabulous singers. I mean, the first that comes to my mind is John Sutherland, who was an impressive vocalist, but definitely diction wasn't her forte, her strong feature. To me, diction is extremely important. Of course, being Italian, I sing, I would say 95% of the times in Italian, 95% of the times in Italian. So I have an advantage because it's my nature. But even when I have to sing in a different language, which has been French, German, very little, or even Spanish, to me, it's very important to try to find the right use of the text of diction. Each language has its own IPA, and going specifically to teaching Italian diction to American singers, of course, the first thing is to try to make them understand how Italian has really pure vowels. We have these beautiful five vowels that we have in any language, but in Italian they're very straightforward. They don't change shape like in English, for example. So we have a, e, I, o, u. Those five vowels stay the same throughout all the process of singing. So this is the main challenge, because in English we have these schwas and diphthongs, so it
The
changes.
diphthongs, the double vowel,
Exactly,
the vowel
exactly.
that sometimes has a vowel sometimes has three parts to it.
Correct, correct. So specifically with the recitativi, which is something that I've always done together with, coaching music. But with recitativi, it's where really, as you just said, you really have to have a control as much as possible of the language. Of course, I've been living in here in New York for 20 plus years, and I have an accent. So you will never require for a singer to be absolutely perfect, but try to be as close as a native singer as possible. So recitativi, as you said before, it's a way of basically, it's like a monologue, a dialogue, or a conversation between a few people with notes. So what I try to make them understand is really to treat them as an actor who on stage doing like a play. So of course, the first thing is I make them to translate the recitativi into English or their native language. I have also Chinese students, for example, not only Manhattan School of Music. So of course, I make them speak the recitativi in their own language, then translate them into English, and then of course try to tell them in Italian, so that they at least can find in their own language the right pace and the mood, the character, the feelings during that the character has during the enunciation of the recitativi. And of course, you know very well, teaching a singer, you have to teach how to, vibrate your voice throughout and to make the voice going throughout the music between connection of vowels and consonants. During recitatives, these doesn't happen as much, because I always really try to tell my students not to vibrate the voice too much. You cannot say like Susanna non viene, or like a recitativo secco of Susanna and Figaro duet. It has to be like a little dialogue. You cannot vibrate all the notes. So
Right.
it's, if you say voglio andare a casa, I'm gonna go home, speaking, you just put notes, voglio andare a casa, and you just go there throughout the line of how the Italian phrasing goes.
Correct.
So
Correct.
exactly. So this is basically, in a very concentrated way, how I try to make singers enjoy recitative. Also because you know very well that you mentioned the Marriage of Figaro, but in any opera of that period, from Handel before, Mozart and Rossini afterwards, and so many Italian contemporaries of the end, especially the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th, during the recitatives is when the action happens and when
Right.
most of the feelings are expressed by characters. So it's
Yes.
very important for a singer to be as real, quote unquote, as possible, because you have to really try to express fear, desire, love, anger, all these fantastic fan of feelings that each character has in opera.
Correct. It's an enormous part of the task of being a complete opera singer is the study of recitativo, and I think it also require, if you don't, it's not just of standing there and delivering the big arias, if and which have their own problems, but in the recitative, this is where you have to have some degree of acting, some degree of of a facility with expressing yourself and understanding phrases. I find that sometimes today, because people are not hearing as much in their learning, they're
Yes.
visually learning, which is actually a very unnatural way of the human being. Our eyes are limited. Our eyes can only look one direction. They can't see behind, and they have limited peripheral vision. But we are
Yes.
being forced through AI and technology and everything to do everything through our eyes. But actually, our ears are 360 degrees, can hear very far away, all surround, and the most amazing shades. And it's always through oral learning that the human has developed, oral traditions, repetition, being able to repeat, being able to memorize what somebody has told you. People, great religious leaders, for example, would train their disciples to sit and listen to a 3-hour lecture, memorize every word, and then later transcribe it. This is still happening today in certain religious.
Yes.
So the training of memorization and so I find that this is difficult when I had a little about when we're too much with the eye. So we have to get past the first. I ask my students to just read the words, just even in their own language. Forget about recitative, even the words of a song. You know, if you're not reading them like a dialogue or a monologue, you never can. A recitative, you have to really read it like a script.
Oh,
And it has to
absolutely.
be, like this, and it's not in your language. It's in Italian.
It's a challenge, of course, for
Yeah.
a non-native singer. And as you said, I mean, opera uh, comes. I mean, the word melodrama, which is how the
Right.
opera was born in Italy in the beginning of the 17th century.
Yeah.
It's melodrama is drama and music. It's a combination. So of course,
Right.
the music is extremely important, but composers of those times, they really wanted words and drama to have an absolute big value. And we're going to talk about, composers of during the 19th century, early 20th century, Verdi and all his wonderful operas. Of course, for him, la parola verdiana, whatever he wanted to say is that words in opera are extremely important. You have to color words. You have to make sense of what you're saying.
Yes.
And for Italian, sometimes we have Italian singers who don't really pay attention to words
Right.
either. So you must
Exactly.
have something inside that tells you, hey, try to sing beautiful as possible, but also you must give sense to what you sing, because in that moment you are a character and you have an audience in front of you that most of the times, especially of course, but even in Italy, in Italian singers who sings in Italian, not everybody understands him or her,
Hmm.
because you know very well that the words are somehow modified when you sing. You
Yes.
cannot be so clear as much as you try.
Right.
So you have, even if they don't understand exactly each word, but you have to try to color your words in a way that makes sense to offer an idea of what the character is. That has
Yes.
to be so. To me, it's extremely important. It's very important you sing beautifully. That of course, musicality and respect of the score of the composer, but also diction, and try to be as clear as possible whenever you perform a character, and try to express. It's very important to be also a good actor. Nowadays, you cannot only stand and sing. You have to make it as credible as possible,
Right.
because an audience becomes bored easily with opera.
Exactly. Exactly. A question came to me. When you teach students, do you teach individually or mainly in classes right now?
Well, what I've been doing for the past years, of course, I coach one-on-one on Zoom. I've been invited to give master classes to some young artist programs whenever I go and sing in a company, where usually if they have a young artist program studio, I usually give some mostly master classes. But now, for example, Manhattan School of Music, I have a class. So I teach, I coach Italian diction for specifically for recitativi, for recitatives in two classes of like
Right.
17, 18 students.
Well,
So, but of course,
yeah.
there is a way of dealing one-on-one with all of them.
Well, but for example, just the simple idea like the doubles, the double consonants. If you have an American student, okay, recitative, but you really see they don't have the doubles, and maybe their vowels are they're too Americanized. How
Yes.
do you address that student specifically, or do you give maybe certain exercises so everybody gets it better?
Well, of course, when it's a class, I try to make clear examples so that they can have the idea of how to approach a double consonant. Try to make the previous vowel as short as possible,
Correct.
like pizza. Of course, it's a double Z, and the E, which is the I in English or E in Italian, is very short. Pizza.
Right.
But also another problem is most singers, American singers or not Italian singers, they also have the tendency to double single consonant when they are in between two vowels, like
Correct.
amore. Amore has one M and one R. So amore, the M is flipped quickly. Amore, the R is also flipped quickly, but you cannot roll amore. You cannot. You can't.
No.
So people think, oh, I see an R. You don't have in English the rolled R, and in American English doesn't exist. So
Right.
the immediate reaction is, oh, I see an R and I say amore. I roll the R, while it's single R or single consonant in between two vowels is always in Italian flipped quickly. So of course, and for that I tell them, as I said before, to make the previous vowel, whenever it's one consonant, to make it a little bit longer. So amore, ore. And also the stress of the word is very important in Italian. When you want to imitate in Italian speaking, you start to do like this, because actually it's a little bit how we speak. We have
Yeah.
this, we tend
It's,
to stress the syllable before the last in a way. So it's a general idea, a little bit stereotyped, but it's somehow true.
yeah.
So I tell them,
Yes.
try to stress, don't stress the last syllable. Don't say amore, especially when you sing. It's a common mistake to stress the last syllable. But if there is no accent like così, però, where you have an accent on the last
Right.
syllables, you have to do exactly the opposite. You have to stress the previous syllable, so it becomes grazie, not grazie.
Right. Exactly. I just realized I should have put us side to side. Oh well. That's okay. That's okay. That all the attention was on you. So that's good anyway. I love it. I love it. I wanted to ask you something a little bit off this technique part.
Sure.
Oh shoot, that was my phone. I wanted to ask how I know that you were singing, and we discovered that we were in Israel at the same time singing
Correct.
the International Opera Professional Development Program with Joan Dorneman from the Met, or actually it was Joan Dorneman's own thing.
That's actually, I find it quite funny that not knowing each other, at least until very recently, we have spent at least a few weeks 30 years ago in the summer and in Tel Aviv
In
in
Tel Aviv.
the same program.
Somehow I missed you. I was
I'm sure that we must have,
probably.
yes.
But you've sung many roles all over the place, and many opera theaters. But how did you find this Italian diction coach career at the same time of that's a very specific thing. Very cool thing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how
Well,
did that happen?
I think it comes from the fact that there are not many Italian. Before coming to America, I lived for 10 years in Mexico City, and I sang. So I speak Spanish, of course, and I sang at the Opera House in Mexico City and in other theaters a lot. And of course, they would ask me, sometimes or I would hear some mistakes
Ah,
during, so they would ask me some corrections. So that's where I started to, sometimes to just as a colleague or, because also it's something that as I told you, I always liked, I tried to make it as effective as possible, diction. So that's how I started, to give advices. Then eventually when I moved here to the States, of course, there are not many Italian native singers here in the States. Of course, there are, but not many. And so as well, I started to, to hear, and sometimes I cannot stay still and silent. And I would say, hey, can I, during, for example, rehearsals of in a theater of, I don't know, Così fan tutte or whatever opera, Barbara Seville, whatever, I would hear something from my colleague, and after, you get acquainted a little bit. So I would, nicely go, do you mind if I correct, because nobody would correct those words, and I would say, can I? And they, of course, they would say 99% of the time, they would say, yes, of course, please do help me. So from, a sort of friendly kind of thing that it's still the same, I started to, sometimes to be hired. Actually, I was actually my last year at the program in Tel Aviv. I was it was in 2000. I was hired also, apart from being still a student, but I was also hired as Italian coach. So
wow.
John Donovan would give me some, of the singers, yeah, especially younger singers, to coach them in Italian. So that's what happened. And then eventually I started to be, more and more invited in private classes, as I told you, some master classes, and that's eventually, pandemic definitely made it happen more and
Ah,
more. Yes,
ah,
because during the pandemic, many of these online programs started. So I
correct.
was invited to 1, 2, 3, and then eventually I'm still part of this very interesting um, international program online, which is called Vincerò, where there are many fantastic coaches of voice teachers, etc., and of any kind, and coaches, diction coaches, and so we prepare. I mean, students prepare operas with coaches. So I'm still part of this online program, which goes on every year, and
Wow.
yeah. So
Wow. I need to know more about that. We can talk
absolutely.
afterwards on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Convincerò.
Vincerò, like
Oh,
the
vincerò.
vincerò. Yeah, yeah, like the vincerò,
Yeah,
like
I'm
like
going to be
the
victorious. I'm going to
exactly. I'm
win.
gonna exactly. So I think
Winning. Winning.
it's a very smart title for a program,
Yeah.
and it's very successful. So this is I'm Italian coach at the Lamont School of Music at Denver University. So I do that. I sang at the Opera Colorado a few times. So when I'm there, I'm present. But if
Ah,
not, I coach them on Zoom as well.
I see. Yeah. Well,
So that's
I
how
think
I try to,
that's
I
wonderful.
still sing. I still, with my repertory, I think that I have a little bit of more longevity than others, because the
Right.
kind of roles that I perform, even if you still have to sing, but I have a little bit more longevity than, and
Yes.
I still sing. So parallel to my career as of an opera singer, I also try to accommodate. Like now, for example, I'm until the end of April, I don't have any gigs, so I work until the end of April at Manhattan School of Music, and I have my students online. I work with Vincerò, I work with Denver University,
Yes.
and I fulfill two things that I like very much: singing mainly, because I've been singing since I was a little. I think that also you were in the children chorus,
Yes.
and I was at children chorus at La Scala as well for like 7 years,
Oh,
until
wow.
I couldn't sing it as
Yeah. You
a
couldn't sing
boy
because the
anymore.
voice changed.
Exactly.
What were you? What were you? Soprano or
I was a
alto?
soprano. Yeah, I was a soprano. Yeah, and usually that's what happens.
Yeah.
Boy sopranos, they usually, when they develop, they go a little bit lower, and so and vice versa. So
But
that
not
was for me.
always. But not always.
No, not always, no, but it happens
Usually.
quite often. Yeah.
I
So
have
that's
one.
how. Yeah, please go ahead.
That's wonderful. I have one boy who was a boy singing more boy soprano, and he came to me as his voice was changing, and it was like, I wanted to tell him, please just don't sing at all for like 2 years, come back. But
Yes.
he was already in programs and in this. And it's like, I said, okay, but we're going to work very carefully, very delicately, and
Oh, that's a
whatever.
very fragile
So
age.
it somehow worked out. His voice is coming in, and I said, I think you're going to be baritone. But the more we're working, the more it seems like maybe he will be tenor after all.
Oh, you see?
But it's because I've been so careful with him. And like say, you can't do this. No, you can only sing this. No. Anyhow, that was like, and I have now another little boy, he's 10 years old, and he's a soprano, but he sometimes sings with so much manliness and force, and he's so talented. I told him, that's fine. I know you're hearing the men singing like that, but you're only 10. And actually your voice is delicate. So just stay delicate, because when you're 13, your voice is going to start changing. So we don't want your voice to be finished by the time you're 13, because you're
Absolutely. You have to be careful.
But he's so talented. He came to his second lesson, and he brought me the musical he's in. Basically, he said, I want to sing you a song. He didn't sing me a song. He sang me the whole musical, all the roles, and the dialogue. Like, okay, I heard enough. But
it's fantastic.
With very talented people, you teach differently than people who are hard workers. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you do something, of course, being an opera singer, I know what kind of advices to give to young singers, but I try to do what I know I'm good at, which is, diction, phrasing,
yes,
Italian repertoire.
Yes.
But, teaching technique is something, it's a big responsibility. So I prefer advices, of course, I know, but I prefer to not to put myself into like building a voice, which is something that you must have a special skill for.
Yes,
like you do.
I do this. I do the building. I can also coach too, but God sends me the people who need their voices built or rebuilt many times, who've damaged their voice, which, as you know,
happens a lot.
A lot in even in a young person. One of my students, she's been with me since she's 9 years old. Again, one of these talented girls, just wants to sing all the time. Does she really want to learn how to sing? Well, now she's singing so much, some things had to go off. So finally, it was an opportunity for her to really learn what I've been trying to teach her for 5 years, to really how to hold a tone and pure resonance and focus on it, and not just imitate all the time, imitate, and never really connecting to the breath properly, never really finding the throat, never finding the res, never. It was too boring. She couldn't go there.
Yeah.
And she could sing anything. So even a little vocally she could do, but if I sang it for her a little bit, so it's tricky. It's very tricky working with each singer.
And I think that also now, definitely, people have definitely much less patience. Absolutely, and they want results immediately. I think that we live in a world where you Google everything. You don't really search and learn. You just have an answer for everything. And people, especially younger generation, so they want results immediately. And once upon a time, the greatest, they really, even if they would, make their debut young, but they would dedicate since they were like 17, 18, and in a way that today is impossible to think about, studying hours and hours every day. And it's very different now. So
and really doing things that are not very flashy. like just singing a perfect scale very slowly, for example, with
Absolutely.
different
Yeah.
vowels.
Who wants to do that? They want to sing Aida immediately, or
You know,
Vincerò, what they call it. That's what they want to do.
or to study how you are standing and how you. But this is what I get
Absolutely.
my students to do. I get them to learn how beautiful it can be, how fascinating it is, how healing it is.
And it is, absolutely, it
You
is.
know,
It is, finding connection with your body and parts of your body that we are so fortunate to have functioning is a real gift, and it's a
yes,
magical thing to see
it,
them,
it is
to see
magical.
results.
It is magical. When you pull it all together, it feels magical, and the audience feels its magic, which is why I put under my little book, the little book I wrote, Sopranos Are Not Pianos, I put
Uh-huh.
underneath how vocal magic happens for women singers. I was targeting women singers, and I ended up, after writing the book, getting a lot of men singers calling me. I don't know why.
Well, at the end is the same thing.
Yeah.
At the end it
So,
is.
yeah. But, just like music is magical, music is divine. And we're going to end our little recording, but we might continue after. Music, when we're doing opera, in my opinion, we're dealing with some of the most inspired, most elevated forms of music in the Western world, music traditions that we could possibly have. Um, Unfortunately, even opera today has fallen into a lot of uh, distortions,
Yes,
where
I agree. I
especially
agree.
because the opera houses of today are so large and so big that they force more and more just loud, big, belting singing,
Yes.
which if you go to the opera houses in Europe, like in Zurich Opera, where I was a soloist for a few years, um, it holds what, 1,400 seats maybe. It's like a little jewel box, perfect acoustics, and there's so much intimacy. There's so much connection. You're not that far away from the audience.
Yes.
You can have smaller voices, bigger voices. You can hear the voices, and that's when opera is exciting. When it's just sort of far away and there's big how do you call it, subtitles, and it's just
Subtitles.
loud singing. To me, that's not opera. And then of course
I
when you
agree.
update it and start to propagandize your morality and your latest political message,
Oh,
overlay it.
I don't think it's a political message. I think it's just somehow a way of shocking people, or
all
to
kinds
try to
of
say, yes,
all
try to
kinds of ways to
say,
update the opera.
yeah,
Why
yeah,
don't you
what
find the
for?
humanity in the opera? Why don't you say it's a
What?
story
Yeah.
written in a certain time about certain people?
And there are operas that don't make sense, like what sense that could Suor Angelica make in if it's performed in the 20th century?
Right.
What girl would be forced to go to convent for having a out of wedlock baby? It's absurd. Doesn't make any sense. But they try to make it like it makes sense to make an opera modern in terms of direction. I don't believe in that.
I don't either. You don't need to. You need to find what's the reality of
Hmm.
that story, which we're humans. It doesn't matter of the way it was in those days. This is a woman who's suffering, who's been punished, who's
Yeah.
alone in with all kinds of fears and traumas. And we still have those things.
And for example, now at the Met, they're doing a new production of La Forza del Destino, which is featured in a subway somewhere.
Oh, good. Well,
I don't understand. What's La Forza del Destino, really?
I mean,
What's the
opera
point?
is a grandness, is a heightened lens into the human drama, the eternal human drama of all the emotions. Now, of course, if you've lost the human drama because you prefer to be an AI bot, then you
That's
won't
that's yeah,
understand.
yeah, yeah. That's today's life.
Well, that some of us are more interested in retaining our humanity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess so. Luckily
So,
so.
and when we're using our voice live in this way without a microphone, we we are still then have an opportunity of representing the magic of being a human being and the elevations, the soul vibrations that come through the purity and the elegance of trained singing. I speak about it often. It's my
I totally agree.
yeah. So I'm going to stop our recording, but I'm going to thank you for coming on to start
My pleasure, Adda.
my series. But stay on for 1 second while we say goodbye. And hopefully we can speak again, and maybe we can show some examples. We'll figure out technically how to do it and make comments. It would be fun.
That would be absolutely fun.
It would be fun. All right. Have a wonderful day, but stay online. And I hope you all enjoyed this and come back soon. And I will get some more videos up soon. I have some other people lined up for the rest of the month. I'm going to stop the recording now.